I'm Amanda. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Hold on. This is going to be really interesting. I need my water. Hi, everyone. Thank you to Jesse and Candace for asking me to come out here. And Jesse told me not to F it up. So if I do, blame him. It's all his fault. Thank you, Curtis, he's not even here, for opening. That he did a really great job. I am really grateful to be here, to be sober. If you don't feel that way, welcome. If you're in your first 30 days, welcome, Dante. That's awesome. We all had 4 days at one point. Just remember that. You're not alone. Let this room prove that. We don't have to do this alone. This is a we program. Never, ever, right? My sobriety date is March 13th, 2012. So I just celebrated 12 years last month. And yeah, totally God, not me. A lot of willingness, a lot of unwillingness, a lot of doing things that I didn't want to do. But I'm really grateful to be sober today because I almost wasn't. And I'll share a little bit about that. My home group is Happy Hour Rancho Cordova group, which we meet in Fair Oaks. If you're not alcoholic, you know, some dysfunction here, as you can tell by the meeting. Thank God we don't do this perfectly, right? So Happy Hour home group, we meet on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. I have a sponsor, and she's actually here. Thank you, Carrie, for showing up for me. I love you so much. And I sponsor women, and some of those women are also here. It is a privilege to be in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous today. That hasn't always been the case. If you don't have a sobriety date or a home group or a sponsor, or maybe you're not reaching your hand out, I would encourage you to do that, because my experience is that I can't get to a spiritual experience unless I do all of those things. So what I was like, I was born to an alcoholic mother, and I don't know if anybody has experience with any sort of alcoholic parents, but my mom gave me and my older brother up when I was 6 months old. He was a year older than me, so he was 18 months. And literally she called my dad up and said, I do not want to be a mom. You come get the kids. And she literally gave us up so she could drink like she wanted to drink. And so growing up, my dad remarried very quickly, and I was the middle child in this family, and I always felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I wasn't part of. I felt like I wasn't loved. I wasn't given the attention, the validation that I wanted. And I was the middle child. I was the black sheep. And if anybody can relate to that, welcome here. What I understand is I have a thinking problem today. And back then, I really believe I was born an alcoholic. I can identify as being restless, irritable, discontent, like it talks about in the doctor's opinion, at a very, very young age. I had two older siblings and a younger brother, and they got all the attention, so I wanted to be like them and my older siblings, and so I taught myself how to read because they were getting the attention that I wanted, I felt like I deserved. So I taught myself how to read, and I figured if I excel in school and I do all these things, then I'm going to get the attention from my parents. I don't know if anybody can identify with that, maybe not. But what I started doing was I started just reading books, and that was my first escape from reality. I didn't want to live in the life that I was living. Although my life wasn't that great, like that terrible, to me it wasn't that great. And so I would read these books, and I would escape reality and pretend like I was these characters. And it was just the first, for me, like not wanting to be who I was. And as I grew up, I didn't have a terrible childhood, but I was so afraid. I like to describe the way I felt as a scared, insecure little girl walking around this world with no clue how to live life. I didn't get the rule book on life that everybody seemed to get. I was terrified. I was so full of fear. I remember I went out and tried out for cheerleading, like in elementary school or middle school or whatever it was, and I didn't make the team. And it was like just that rejection, so much rejection. I had fear of abandonment. The alcoholic mother who abandoned me when I was 6 months old, she was in and out of my life for a long period of time, and I'll talk about that. And that doesn't make me alcoholic, the fact that she was alcoholic. what makes me alcoholic is it talks about on page 44. When I start drinking and I can't stop, or when I don't know what's going to happen, right? If I cannot stop drinking, and I'm gonna butcher it. So I have my book here because I don't, one of these things. But it's really important for me to know what I'm up against, what I suffer from, right? So if you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control of the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. So from the very first time I picked up a drink at the age of 14, I drank alcoholically. And I needed a drink long before then. I was a thief. I was thinking about this earlier today. It's funny when you get asked to speak, you start memories pop up in your head. And I was thinking about this time my sister and I went to the grocery store. We rollerbladed because we couldn't drive, and it tells you how young we were. And we stole a bunch of makeup. And I remember we were sitting at the payphone calling our parents to come pick us up because we were too lazy to walk home at that point in time. We rollerbladed there, but we wanted to ride home. Had we not called my parents, we'd have not gotten caught. Okay, so what happened was the security guy from the grocery store picked us up and came over and said, "Did you guys steal makeup?" And we're like, "No, we didn't steal makeup." Well, let me see the receipt. And of course, we didn't have the receipt. And that's just what kind of person I was. I was literally a liar. I was a thief. I loved stealing. I very rarely got caught, but I did get caught that time. And we were detained in the back of the grocery store for quite a while until our parents came, and we got in a lot of trouble. The thing about my story is I have a lot of consequences. There are times where I did get caught. It didn't matter what the consequence was, whether it was my principal, my probation officer, my parents, my boss, or other people. I would not stop doing what I needed to do, right? If you feel the way I felt, that restless, irritable discontentedness, I needed a drink. I needed a drink almost daily. And prior to alcohol, I was doing other forms of alcohol. So when I got in trouble in high school, and I had a probation officer, and I literally could not stop doing other forms of alcohol, even though I was getting random drug tested. That's just the life that I lived. I was so uncomfortable in my skin. I was so afraid. I remember I moved from San Jose to El Dorado Hills, and I remember just the first 2 weeks at that high school, I just felt so out of place. Has anybody ever been the new kid in school? Yeah, right? Really uncomfortable. And you're already, it's a high school and it's El Dorado Hills. I definitely did not fit in with that crowd. I live there now again, but I swore I would never move back. But I just remember, I was sitting in the bathroom crying. I'm like, these people are not like me. And then I found my people. I found the people that partied like me, right? And I didn't even party at that point in time, but I found the people that partied like I wanted to party, right? And they were all on probation. So, of course, what happens? I wind up on probation. And so, I just think back from the time I started drinking at 14 and when I got told to stop drinking at the age of 28, it was on. And I had so many consequences. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about that because that's not why we're here. But your drinking probably looked different than my drinking. Maybe we drank the same. I don't know. I was a bar drinker. I love to go to the bars, and I definitely, my sponsor was saying earlier at dinner, she only blacked out 3 times in her life, and I was like, I blacked out all the time. I always wanted to black out. I did not want to live in reality. I don't know if that was anybody else's case, but I hated living in my reality, right? I always wanted to go balls to the wall. I loved the chaos. I loved being in the bars. I was also, it's kind of like Bill's story, right? It's these ominous warnings which we failed to heed. I had all these warnings of why not to pick up that drink. I'm never going to be an alcoholic like my mom. And by the time I was 17 years old, I was literally told from my parents when I was coming home drunk almost every day, you're going to be an alcoholic just like your mom. And I was so angry at them. But I didn't know what alcoholism was, right? I didn't really know what I suffered from until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that I had this spiritual malady, right? That restless, irritable discontentedness and that mental obsession. I need that. I'm going to do whatever I can to get what I need, right? To change the way I felt. I could not go more than 2 or 3 days without drinking or putting something in my body to change the way I felt because I was just so uncomfortable. And so what happened, as my drinking progressed, I started, getting fired from jobs. I got a DUI. Even though I was on zero tolerance, it didn't matter. I would come to in the morning. I don't even know how my car got out there. Like, I didn't even know I was driving. It was just, and I literally thought, you guys, my life is great. Like, I have, I got some degrees. I had a car, which almost got repoed because I wasn't paying the bill. I came into A thinking, like, how is my life unmanageable, you guys? Like, I got it all going on. Man, that delusion, right? Our head, we believe the lie. It tells us we believe the lie. Like he was talking about, my life was the normal one. My alcoholic life was a normal one. If you didn't drink like me, I didn't hang out with you. I remember I went on a date with this guy, and I drank wine, obviously, before the date. And, why wouldn't you? And I show up, and the guy doesn't even drink. And I'm like, wait, what? You don't drink? And he's like, yeah, I've never drank. Like, my family has a history of whatever. And I was like, okay, that's so weird. By the way, we didn't even finish the appetizers. The date ended really quickly. And then I went and drank. So that gives you a little idea of what I did. Like I said, I managed to go to school. I was really smart. I worked 3 jobs and went to school. It was that party hard, work hard mentality. So for those of you that were able to have that, I was like that functioning alcoholic, right? For those of you that could do that, I was one of those people. For those of you that couldn't, I'm sorry. Not everybody gets that luxury. I know a lot of people say, I don't even know how you got through school. I was like, the only way I got through school is because I was drinking, you guys. People try to ask me today how I got through my schooling. I said I was drunk. I have no idea. I cannot help you if you're sober. Sorry. I didn't do anything really sober, to be honest. I get sent home from work showing up drunk. I thought that was normal. But in Bill's story, like I was saying, I did things that allowed me to drink the way I wanted to drink, right? I was a bartender. I hung out with people that drank the way I did. And, I had to go through this background check in my career. And, this is kind of what led me to Alcoholics Anonymous, unfortunately. Just kidding. I'm really fortunate to be here. I'm going through this background check and to move on with my career. And, I remember meeting with this woman. I think she was a psychologist. And it's like I had to answer these questions on this questionnaire. It's like, how often do you drink? And I'm like, well, right now I'm studying for a test, so I'm not really drinking that much. But 2 months ago, when do you want to know, right? It was always depending upon what was happening in my life. I could kind of keep it together, but I was always drinking. And through this whole background check, these people, they asked me to meet with this committee, and they basically told me, you're a liar, you're a cheat, and you're a thief. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, you lied to the police when you got pulled over. On your police report, it says you said you only had 2 drinks, but you blew a .18. You obviously had more than 2. I'm like, well, doesn't everyone say they only have 2? Isn't that the number you're supposed to say? And I mean, literally, it was just that was a normal thing for me. And when I met with that committee, I just didn't see that I had a problem, right? These people told me I had a drinking problem. Those are the words they used. If you're in this room and you haven't figured, and you've been told you have a drinking problem, or you think you have a drinking problem, stick around a little while. My experience is that my drinking was a solution, right? The bottle was but a symptom. Alcohol, and I didn't understand that until I went through the steps with a sponsor, but these people said if you have a drinking problem, you need to go and do this 6-month program. What that program looked like was doing a daily recovery activity every day. That was Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to do random drug and alcohol testing, and I had to meet with this committee and do this other program. And my last drink on Monday, March 12th, 2012, I shared a bottle of wine with a girlfriend watching Bachelorette. Had I known that was going to be my last drink, I would have gotten drunk, right? But I knew I had to show up for this important appointment the next day, and essentially these people told me my life was over when they told me I had to stop drinking. And, what happened for me on Tuesday, March 13th, 2012, when they said, you have to stop drinking and do this program, I just thought, what do you mean I have a problem? I called this lady, and she said, if you don't have a drinking problem, then stopping for 6 months shouldn't be that big of a deal. For anybody in this room, stopping for 6 months is like a death sentence, right? Like, I couldn't fathom stopping drinking. I couldn't fathom that. And at 28 years old, I thought my life was over. And I had no idea, like, what was going to lie ahead of me. But what I can say is that, you know, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember going to my very first meeting on that Tuesday, and I met this guy I actually went to school with. We were in graduate school together. And I remember taking him out to dinner after the meeting, and I said, okay, so he had been sober for a few months. He was going through the same program as me. And I'm like, so you don't even drink on the weekends? Like, not at all? I just didn't understand. And he had to get random drug and alcohol testing, too. And I'm like, well, once you get tested, don't you just drink? And then, like, you know you're not going to get tested right away, right? And he's just like, no, you don't do that. I literally was going to try to cheat the system. I had no desire to stop drinking at all. And basically, the lady told me if I don't do the program, I'm not going to move on with my career. I had spent a lot of years at that point. I think I was 9 years in going to school. And so I wasn't going to throw away my entire career because that just wasn't what I was going to do. So I committed to doing this thing for 6 months. I went to a little backstory. I went to my very first meeting, actually High Flyers, long before I got sober. I took my little brother to a meeting. He was in trouble for DUIs and some other things. And I remember going to that meeting, and I answered the 20-question questionnaire, and I answered yes to, I think it's like 18 of them. And my brother goes, okay, are you gonna come back to the meetings? I said, no, I'm gonna go get drunk. Like, I am not an alcoholic. And that literally is my story. Like, so I went to that meeting, I was like, and I supported him. So this is somebody, he's kind of part of my story. I used to pick him up from Madhouse, which is where Happy Hour is now. And he was in treatment because he was trying to, he was going to court and fighting this case. And I used to pick him up and go get him drunk and high and drop him off back at treatment when he was supposed to be sober living. Like me, I have no idea what it meant to be sober. I was literally just like, there's no possible way. So I would do this with my brother. And I obviously was not a very good sister supporting him while he's supposed to be sober. Well, that's just a little taste of like the delusion I had. Like, you literally cannot. Like, in my mind, there's no way that you can be sober. So when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was like, okay, I'll do this 6-month program, and I'll move on with my life. So that was my plan. Obviously, I'm still here. I haven't picked up a drink yet. So I got a sponsor. I remember meeting my sponsor on that Friday, and I just remember this girl in the meeting. She was really pretty. She was tall, and she's like, oh, this is my sponsor. You should ask her to sponsor you. And I was like, oh, I want to, like, she was really pretty. Maybe she'll be my friend if I ask her to sponsor me. So the woman became my sponsor, and that other person became my very best friend in AA. So if it wasn't for those two women, I don't know if I'd still be here, to be honest, because that woman brought me to my home group. The meeting that became my home group at 6 Days Sober, and it was this book study, and she showed me what to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. That woman took my hand, and she showed me, get in the car, go to this meeting, get a commitment. I became a greeter of that meeting. There was like 100 people at the meeting. I was terrified of anybody that would walk in the door. Like, I did not want to shake your hand. I didn't want to get to know you. And it was so uncomfortable and nerve-wracking. And I remember if people asked me to read, like, how it works before the meeting, I would tell them no. I was literally terrified to come and to read and do this, obviously. Not my favorite thing to do. So if you're new and you feel like that, welcome. We've all been there. I especially was there. So that woman, I mean, she just showed me, right? She's like, call me every day, get commitments, have your regular meetings. Again, I had to get my court card signed every single day, so I was going to at least 7 meetings a week, if not more. I was unemployed living at home with my parents, so I was going a lot more meetings than that. And I just remember, like, in the beginning, I'm like, I'm doing this, checking the boxes, doing this, checking the boxes. I started going through the steps. And the very first time I did step 1, it was the first time I had seen the true Amanda on paper. My sponsor had me write out the consequences and write out the unmanageability in my life. And it was the very first time I could actually see how I showed up and like, what I thought my life, like, I thought my life was good, right? Like, my car's about to get repoed. All of these like relationships and wreckage I caused, the fact that, I got a DUI, I got fired from jobs, and it was always their fault. It was never my fault, right? And I just looked at that, and I'm like, wow, like my life really is unmanageable. I didn't think it was unmanageable at all. I thought I could manage my life. I don't need God to help manage my life. And that carried on into my sobriety, and I'll tell a little bit about that too, because that definitely doesn't work. If you try to manage your life, in my experience, I end up running my life into the ground, even sober. So that step one, it talks about in the book that we have to concede to our innermost selves are alcoholic. That is the first step to recovery. That is the first step in the book, not the steps on the wall. And at 90 days sober, I'm halfway through I'm halfway through my program, getting ready to drink. I'm thinking about that drink, you guys. I'm literally planning the celebration drink. I'm going through all the motions. I'm going to these meetings. I have the sponsor. And I just remember, God, I was so miserable. Has anybody been miserable in sobriety and like wanted to die? Has anybody been miserable in sobriety and like not wanted to do this thing? Right? Has anybody been miserable in sobriety and like wanted to pick up a drink? Or maybe they have. My experience was at 90 days sober, I was sitting there crying on my bedroom floor. Why do I feel this way? If I just have a drinking problem, I should feel better. Why do I feel worse? Why do I feel worse than when I was out there drinking? I was miserable out there drinking. I remember wanting to die out there, like, what is wrong with me? I just want to be happy. Why can't I be happy? But here I am sober. These people tell me I have a drinking problem, and I'm miserable. Why? Well, my experience was, and I reached out to a woman that night, and thank God for the women that give us their phone numbers. If you get a phone list, you should probably use it. I didn't use it. I was like, why are these people giving their phone numbers? I have no idea. Like, I don't want to talk to these people. Until my sponsor told me to start calling people, and then I used the phone list. But she pointed me to page 417 in the big book, and I'm going to read this because it was a pivotal part of my sobriety. 417, if you haven't read it, it's the acceptance is the answer. Acceptance was the answer story. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it's supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I could accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I needed to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. And when I read that paragraph that night, something happened for me. I knew that the way I drank and all of those things at that point in time, like, it didn't matter. It hit me like, this is not a drinking problem. Like, I have a thinking problem, and the alcohol was my solution. And until I could accept the fact that I was an alcoholic, until I could concede to my innermost self that I was alcoholic, that I completely surrendered, no reservation of any kind. Like, I was planning that drink, right? I would say I was alcoholic. I didn't think I was alcoholic. That's when I finally surrendered to the fact that I was alcoholic. I like to say I caught alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you haven't caught it yet, welcome. Hopefully you keep coming back and you see what that actually means. I like to say that they say don't leave before the miracle happens. I say the miracle happens every single day that we get to breathe the sober breath. We get to live a sober day. I really truly feel that we're all miracles here, and I'm really grateful for the women that have come before me and that continue to come after me, and the men, because without all of you people, I don't know where I'd be today. So 90 days sober, I surrendered. I just said, I'm all in. I am all in. I was on that jumping off point. And so what happened from there, I didn't become like the best AA'er. I like to share a couple pivotal stories in my life. I started sponsoring at 6 months, 9 months sober. I started doing a lot of H&I right around 6, 9 months sober. I was really active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was doing all the things, you guys. I was doing it, one, because I had to, and then because I wanted to. I got to that point of that desperation. And at 2 years sober, I made a lot of decisions based on self. I don't know if anybody does that in sobriety, but I like to do that. And, what happened for me, my sponsor at that time, she goes, I've seen women go out over your behavior. I didn't go out, you guys, but, I was sponsoring women. I was in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. But once again, I wanted to die. It was a very, very dark place. I say the terrible twos it was a really hard point in my sobriety. But I'm so grateful that I was in the middle of the fellowship and I continued to show up and do the work. And a sponsor at that time was like, well, what kind of friend are you? What kind of girlfriend are you? What kind of daughter are you? What kind of employee are you? And I really got to look at 6 and 7 because I was causing so much wreckage in relationships in sobriety that nobody literally wanted to be my friend or be in a relationship with me. And so I had to really look at that 6 and 7. I did 6 and 7. I read 6 and 7, but I wasn't practicing 6 and 7. 6 and 7 is an action step, really 7. It really talks about that humility. And yeah, I went through the 4th and 5th step with my first sponsor, and I remember the very first time, seeing me on paper. She did flashcards. If anybody, their sponsor did flashcards for all their character defects, it's pretty alarming when you see all those defects on flashcards. But it was I had this complete misconception of how I showed up in the world. I had no idea who I was until I saw myself in that 4th column. And she had to actually explain to me all of those defects of character because I had no clue. I was a victim. I had no idea that I was the person that I was. I thought I knew what was best for you. I thought you all wanted to know my opinion. I should control you. I knew I manipulated you, but I didn't think it was that bad. It was all of these things that I did, it was my defense mechanisms. I learned these habits and these traits to survive, but they were not healthy, and they definitely were not becoming of the person that God wanted me to be. So in the 12 and 12, it talks about that humility is a clear recognition of who and what we are, followed by a sincere attempt to become the person that God wants us to be. That requires action. That requires for me to pause, to take contrary action, to not say the thing that I want to say, to not do the thing that I want to do, right? And that's really hard for somebody like me, and probably most alcoholics in my experience. We like to do whatever we want to do, right? And when I'm driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pitying, I will do anything I need to do to feel better, right? Out there, it was drinking, or it was whoever's in my way, get out of my way until I can get what I want, right? It didn't really matter. I try to get whatever I wanted, however I wanted, when I wanted it, right? And I come in here and I'm like, that's not how the world works. I was so delusional to this idea. And so when that sponsor told me at 2 years sober, this person that I was showing up as, I was still the same Amanda that had walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Just because we have time around here does not mean we're all well and wonderful here. Just because we have some years around here does not mean we are that great of people. In my experience, and I'll just talk about me, my experience is that we can get some time around here, but we can still be really sick, right? I can still be that same person at 2 years sober. I was still the same Amanda that walked in here. I had not changed. I was just 2 years away from a drink. Yeah, I did a bunch of things, right, in Alcoholics Anonymous, but nobody wanted to be around me. Nobody could tolerate me. I had no excuse anymore. It's not like I was drinking. And so, what happened for me at that point in time, I really had to take a look at my actions. And that didn't mean I changed that much. But I got to grow up here. And so, as I continued, 5 years sober, I had been doing AA for a really long time. Anybody feel 5 years you'd be able to be done, right? Can't we just be done with this thing? Why do I have to keep coming back to meetings? 33 years old, I got my career. At the time I was dating this guy, and Alcoholics Anonymous was getting in my way. And I started making a lot of decisions based off self. I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but it talks about he mentioned it, and I would love that you mentioned that, this accepting spiritual help, or this dying, this alcoholic death. It's well, how bad is the alcoholic death, really, right? How bad is it? How long am I going to live? Maybe I'll be able to function a little bit, but then it's we always look for that door number 3. Anybody have experience with looking for that other option? Like we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe I just won't accept all the spiritual help, but I'll try to do some things on my own. Well, what happened for me is that God was not relevant in any relationship in my life, which I talked about at 2 years sober, and again, it happened at 5 years sober. And, I left a home group on a resentment because those people were just doing it all wrong. And my sponsor I was telling my sponsor I had to go through the steps again because I was all messed up, you guys. I need some help. She's like, you need to go work with another woman. I said, that's not going to help me. Literally. I got a different sponsor after that. And, I was in this relationship where I was trying to fit the square peg into the round hole, and I was trying to get him to do all these things that I thought he should be doing, and I was really trying to manipulate the situation to my benefit, not to his. I didn't really care what he wanted, is what I wanted. And what I found at 5.5 years sober, I was looking at another form of alcohol, and I almost relapsed. I was miserable once again in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm like, this is going to fix me. This is going to take away the way I'm feeling, all of the stuff going on. I was going to 1 meeting a week. If people would ask me to speak, I literally would not respond. I wouldn't even give the courtesy of saying no. I just wouldn't respond. I wasn't sponsoring women. I was not telling my sponsor the truth. And I was just like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I found myself looking at a solution. It was going to fix my problem. And thank God I had a moment of clarity at that point in time. The only reason why I'm looking for a way out is because I'm so miserable that I'm not actually doing what I should be doing. And, I had enough AA under me, and I was still going to at least 1 meeting a week. And I went to a meeting, I think, the next day. It was this young people's meeting on Wednesday night, and they were looking for a new secretary. I think the secretary got drunk or something. And I was like, I will do it. I just need to be of service. Whatever you need, I will do it. And I just remember being so desperate. I don't want to feel that way, and I don't want to drink again. And I came crawling back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I really hadn't left, but I humbled myself. And as soon as, there was somebody that needed help, I reached my hand out because I am responsible, right? I am responsible to reach out to the person that's suffering. And, at 6 years sober, on my 6-year sobriety birthday, my dad and my brother both told me they didn't want to have a relationship with me because of the way I was living my life. And it wasn't the way I was, the way I was telling them to live their life. Let me re-say that. The way I was telling them to live their life. I was really not a fun person to be around, once again. History repeats itself. Are you seeing a theme here in my life? Right? It's just this constant, Amanda's in the way, Amanda's in the way, Amanda's in the way. And, page 63 tells me, I have to abandon myself, to God, or else what? It kills us, right? And before it kills me, I'll drink, or I'll suffer here. And if anyone's suffering here or is thinking about picking up a drink, welcome. That is alcoholism. Page 52 tells me, I suffer from these bedevilments, drunk or sober. I have trouble with personal relationships. I am a prey to misery and depression in sobriety. I have these fears, these delusions, this self-seeking, financial insecurity, all of that stuff. Anybody ever feel like that in sobriety? You don't have to raise your hand and be embarrassed. It's fine. I know you have. We all have. Because we're not alone, right? We have this thing, and what I've learned is that God is everything or God is nothing. And until I could accept spiritual help in all of my areas of my life, all of spiritual help, right? It tells me in the book, this program, this power will solve all of my problems. Not just my one problem, alcoholism, all of my problems. But I have to have trust. I have to have faith. I actually have to turn my will over to the care of God. I have to turn my thoughts and my life over to the care of God. I can't sit here and say, yes, I'm doing AA, but I'm going to sit here and run my life the way Amanda wants to run it. I'm not practicing step 3. And my experience in sobriety when I do that is I find myself looking at another form of alcohol or being miserable in sobriety or wanting to die or not wanting to help you because I'm so full of self, I don't think I can do anything, right? God, thank God for the experience that I've had because I can tell you the last 6 years has been better than the first 6 years. And that's because I realized my primary purpose here is to help God's children. Is to find that power that has enabled me to be restored to sanity. And today I really feel like I've been restored to sanity. And to help God's children get out of that, those, I was talking about it earlier, but like just that death, right? That alcoholic death. Or the suffering in Alcoholics Anonymous. So after 6 years, I started, I got a sponsee. I was like, I will do anything I have to do. And from there, it just like, I'm going to help. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to show up. And I'm going to do these things because I get to do them, not because I have to. And also because I want to. And not every day do I want to do Alcoholics Anonymous. Believe me, I don't. When the phone rings, it's like, do I really have to answer it? Should I answer it? And sometimes I'm like, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. So if I say yes, you got the lucky one. Sometimes it's like, I'll call them back. But, depending upon what I'm doing. But that's just my truth, you guys. Like, that's the realness. Like, that's my self-centeredness. Is like, I don't really have time for this right now. So I met my husband in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was somebody that had asked me to speak, like, right after this whole thing happened, and I got asked to speak at happy hour, and I've never left that meeting because that meeting is fire. So if you haven't been there, come check it out. But I really felt the presence of God in that room. That room changed my life. There's newcomers in that meeting talking about God, having peace and serenity more than I had ever experienced at 6 years sober. And it really inspired me, and the work that he was doing in Alcoholics Anonymous inspired me. He was surrounded by men. He was doing the deal. And that's the beautiful thing here is some days that maybe I do a little bit more than he does, or he does more than me, but we inspire each other to continue doing this. And one thing that he has never done, he's never told me not to meet with the newcomer, not to stay after the meeting, not to go speak at the meeting, and not to be of service to Alcoholics Anonymous. He's never gotten in my way of my recovery, and I'm so grateful for his support and his love, because I don't know if I would be here if it wasn't for him and his guidance. So just a little bit blurb about Nick so I don't get a resentment later. Love you. Okay, so got that one off. Okay, so for real. Okay. All right. So, what I've learned in the last few years of Alcoholics Anonymous is I don't really know a lot here. What I know is that I continue to remain teachable. And I don't know, something hit me earlier. It's like I was sitting in a meeting and we were talking about some things, and I was talking to women afterwards, and it's like we all get to have our own experience here. Like, every day we wake up is a day that we've never experienced, right? Like, we're all just humans walking around this earth, like, no clue on what's going to happen today. Right. And I think, like, oh, you should know what's going to happen today. And I sometimes treat you that way. And what I try is, like, it's true, though. Like, and I was thinking about this. It's like, how can I show up today and really just be of service to God? Because really that's my primary purpose, right? I don't do it perfectly. Some days I meditate with my husband. Some days I tell him no. Some days I pray with my daughter in the morning. Some days we don't, right? Like, my spiritual practice is not perfect. I'm not perfect. I have a very, I'm going to make excuses, so I'll just stop there. Because it's just an excuse. I could wake up earlier, to be honest. But what I will say is that today God is everything. And what that looks like for me today is, I say yes. I have way too many women that I sponsor. Fortunately, I love you girls. But I have been taught to say yes to Alcoholics Anonymous. And those women that I've not always wanted to say yes to have come into my life at the time that I've really needed them the most. I had no idea what that was going to look like for me. And, Amanda. And so, I never know what life has in store. I never know what God's plan is for me. And, that acceptance that we talk about that I read, it kind of goes bigger than that. Has anybody had, like, an idea, like, what their life should look like? I need to be this person, or I need to have this job, or I need to have a husband that looks like this, or I need to have this many kids, or I need to have, like, whatever that might be, right? Like, I need to live in this house with this kind of fence. I don't even know. Like, we all have these ideas. And, like, the book tells me, I have to get rid of all my old ideas or the result is nil, right? Unless we let go absolutely. I have to get rid of all of my old ideas, right? If I have this spiritual awakening, this spiritual experience, like I literally have to get rid of like everything that I think I know what's best for me and just accept God's plan in my life. And I don't do that perfectly. But like, I had this old idea that like I'm supposed to be, have this career and have this husband and like I'm supposed to be, whatever it looks like. And I was like, yeah, I'm supposed to have 2 kids. Like I'm just supposed to have another child. And one thing I will say is I'm fortunate that when Nick and I found out that we were having our first child, it was a surprise, and I was really mad. And I called my sponsor. I was like, it's not supposed to happen like this. Like we had just gotten engaged and like. We got pregnant on the engagement trip, and that's not how the world works. But what I will say is, I came home with a ring and a baby. Don't go to Thailand. Just kidding. But what I will say is God knew what he was doing. Because had that not happened, we literally got married the weekend before COVID. Because I was like, I'm not going to go, whatever. I was pregnant, and I was like, we're going to get married. I planned a wedding in 3 months. And, like, literally COVID happened, and nobody knew that was going to happen, right? And I look back, and I look back in my life, and I see how God has literally had his hand in every single part of my life. I just couldn't see it. And I see it in hindsight. So if you don't believe in this God, right, I remember the obsession got removed really quickly. But, like, it's really hard for me to see it. It's really hard for me to accept that God knows what's best. And, like, that acceptance. Like, once I can accept that I don't know what's best for my life, that God has a plan, like, I can be really serene, right? I can be okay with everything, be okay with the world. And that's not what happened for me. Like, I was like, I want to have another kid. And so we made this decision. And you know what happens when we make decisions, right? Like, we have, like, all of this, for me, is like, this is what has to happen. And it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening how I wanted it to happen. And in fact, it was happening like the worst way that it could possibly happen. And a little just bit of like the last couple of years is, I've had 3 miscarriages. And a year ago, I was pregnant for the last time. And I would have found out next month would be that at 12 weeks that the baby had heart stopped beating. And I share that because I had these ideas. Like, I was so adamant, like, I have to have another kid. I was like, God, why are you doing this to me? Like, why is this happening to me? And I could not let go of that idea. And it doesn't matter whether it's a kid or the job or the girlfriend or the husband or whatever it is. What you replace it, you guys. What I knew is that until I could just accept that this is God's plan for me, whatever that plan was, it wasn't what I wanted. It was the most horrific time of my life. But the women that I said yes to, leading up to that, carried me through one of the darkest times of my life. And my sponsor, and my God, and my husband, and all of those people. And I had no idea what was going to happen. But I'm so grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous was there and that I said yes. Because had I not, I don't think you wouldn't have me here today. I probably would have drank. I didn't think about drinking. And the beautiful thing about that is, when my brother died at 19 years old, I drank myself to a stupor. Like, that was the only way I could cope. When my uncle died, I couldn't even show up for my mom. I just drank. And over the last 2 years, with all of the loss that I've had, the thought of the drink has never crossed my mind, and that is a miracle. That's a miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got to walk through it with grace and dignity, I like to think. I didn't have to isolate. I showed up for those women. I said yes. When people asked me, it's not what I wanted to do. I don't like sharing that up here, but what I know is like when I can share my truth, and if anybody in this room is suffering, and you feel like you have to like suffer alone, you don't. Never, ever do you have to pick up a drink. It doesn't matter what you're going through. I watch people walk through death and really difficult times in sobriety. And that just happens to be my experience. And a woman I was talking to earlier, it's like, why do we have to have these painful experiences that get us to grow closer to God? But it's just that. Because if I don't have those experiences, more likely than not, I'm not going to rely upon God. Because I don't need God. But I need God in those moments. It's either God or alcohol. And today my solution is God And I know if I'm not under the influence of Alcoholics Anonymous or God, I'm under the influence of Amanda, and that's not a good place to be, because as you can see in the history of my sobriety, I will run it to the ground, I will be miserable, and I will ruin relationships, and I'll end up picking up a drink. I am beyond grateful for my life today. I'm grateful that I get to be in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you're in your first 30 days or your last 30 days, just know that you don't ever have to pick up a drink again. Never. It doesn't have to be your solution. It doesn't matter what you walk through. All I know is that Alcoholics Anonymous literally is just a way of life that I've learned. It's not something that I do. It's literally my life. My daughter says, "Oh, what are you doing tonight? Are you going to your meeting tonight?" She's 3.5. She knows. Monday night, Mommy goes to her meeting. Saturday morning, Daddy goes to his meeting. That is what we do. We were raising her, with these principles, and I'm not better than anybody here. I just happen to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get to share my experience, and I'm really grateful that I get to be part of this group and for the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all I got. Thank you.